So I will briefly introduce him. Ricardo is head of the Market Intelligence Division in Bank of Spain. He also worked at the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund. He has published numerous articles in prestigious journals. Today, we will be hearing about one of those, the gender gap in bank credit access. Before I pass this over to Ricardo, I want to thank our funders, Global Affairs Canada, the Swedish SIDA, International Monetary Fund, Jersey Overseas Aid and Comic Relief, and USAID, without whom we couldn't achieve our global mission. Please use the Q&A tab to submit your questions. We will try to answer as many questions as we can. It is now my pleasure to hand over the session to Ricardo for his presentation. Enjoy the session. Over to you, Ricardo.
Thank you very much, Limet. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to present my work at the Toronto Center. Thanks a lot. So I'm gonna start by sharing the presentation I have prepared for this. The work, as Limet has told you, is a paper I have written with two university professors from Madrid. One is Professor Ruth Mateo Secabo and the other is Professor Pablo de Andres. I work at as Demet told you, in the Spanish Central Bank. So first of all, I have to say that everything I'm going to say are my opinions, and they do not necessarily correspond to Bank of Spain or the Euro system. So let's say Bank of Spain said something. It's Ricardo Jimeno, the one who said that. So going into our research, if I'm able to pass the slide, yes. Our goal in this research was to identify if female entrepreneurs has less access to bank credit than male entrepreneurs. So in this case, we wanted to know also if this was a consequence of some kind of discrimination by credit institution, or it was not. It happens because these entrepreneurs has lower credit quality, so it was perfectly rational to get less access to credit. So at least rational from an economic perspective. So the way we try to get to this was to look at a dynamic approach, and I call dynamic because what we did was to look at companies that were created between 2004 and 2014. We look all companies created in Spain in that period. It was 11 years. And it was pre-crisis, during crisis, after crisis. So we have a mix of different moments, and look for those companies where they have where the CEO was a male or a female. So if we know it's a woman or a man, the company, so we have some information in there. We look at companies and not individuals because under Spanish law, information on individuals are not allowed to be used on any kind of study or being recorded. So only information about companies. So that's the reason our study has to be focused on companies and not on individuals. So once we have this information on the companies, in Banco de España, we have a record, a credit register record, where we can look at every time that a bank has a study if they are going to give a credit or not to a company. So we know each time that a bank has think, oh, I'm gonna give a credit to this company, or I'm not gonna give that credit to a company. And we know if they finally give that credit or not. So we have these two types of information. We will know if there has been a demand of credit because some entrepreneur has approached a bank and has said, I want to a credit of, let's say, 100,000 euros, 1 million euros. And the bank has to study if they agree with giving this credit or not. So this information, we have it. We know if they finally give the credit or not. And we know if finally this loan was going into default or was good performance, it was fully paid in full. So we have all this information. And then with all this information, I will show you that we can disentangle three types of discrimination that could explain why women has less access rate. And because there are three theories. One is those of statistical discrimination, of implicit discrimination, or Baker test-based discrimination. I will go now into detail of which one represents. So test-based discrimination means that you don't like a borrower, you don't like some kind of people, you don't trust a woman, whatever, and then you don't give a credit. That will be test-based discrimination that was first described by Becker in 1957. But then you have a second one. This is statistical discrimination. You observe that woman has a lower pay, woman has a lower entrance into the job labor market. Then you observe that they have less credit access, but it could be because you lack some information that explain why they have this less access to credit, for instance. So that could be because there are many reasons that could explain that someone is rejected alone, that could be related but or not to women. For instance, you can imagine that if female entrepreneurs are younger than male entrepreneurs, maybe the variable of interest is not gender but age, and then you will observe this difference in gender, but in fact is reflecting other variables. That will be statistical discrimination. Finally, implicit discrimination is a kind of discrimination that is real. They are discriminated, this group, woman or some people, and the thing is that this is unintentional, and it was not because the one who is discriminated wanted to discriminate. He or she doesn't know that he is or she is discriminated. It's just unconscious. So these are the three types of discrimination that could happen. So we are going to go through each of them. So imagine that you are in a situation where there is no discrimination. You have some woman and men that have created a company, and they have some great quality of this company or their assets or their background, how good or bad is that company, that idea for a new company. So this credit quality is something that banks try to guess and use this credit quality to decide if they grant this credit or not. So this is the credit scoring, CS I put there, and if there is no discrimination, you will apply the same standard for men than for women. So the likelihood of a woman or a man of getting along when they ask for them should be the same. They will be as likely one of the other to get that. This is the situation, the wonderful situation that we will like to have. But then you have test-based discrimination. In this situation, although men and women has the same credit quality, what happens is that the credit scoring that you are asking for women is higher than the credit scoring that you are asking for men. In that situation, what happens is that the likelihood of granting a loan to a woman will be lower than the likelihood of granting a loan to a man. Okay, and it will be something that is happen because you give a different credit scoring, a different level of credit scoring to give that loan. Then you have statistical discrimination. In this situation, the level that the bank is asking to grant a loan is the same for men and women. What happens now is that the average credit quality of female entrepreneurs is lower than that of men. In that situation, it could explain that women are less likely to get a loan than men. Socially, this is not a good outcome, but economically, for the perspective of the bank, this is perfectly rational. For the perspective of a central bank or a supervisor, that would be okay. I think we could consider that would be okay. And finally, you have implicit discrimination. This is a bit more complex, but to get the idea is that although women and men has the same credit quality, the way that the bank is measuring it is getting a bias, a downward bias in the credit quality of women. So they think that women are in the left distribution, when in fact they are in the right distribution. So given this bias in the estimation of the credit quality of women, although the bank thinks that it's applying the same credit standards to men than women, in fact, because they are using a biased distribution of the credit quality, in fact, it's like if they were applying a much higher credit standard. So instead of getting a situation where the likelihood of getting a loan for a woman or getting a loan in the case of men should be the same, in fact, it's less likely for women to get that loan than for men. So this will be the theory that's explaining the different situation. So you see that the meaning of each of them is a bit different. And we will go back each of them, so don't worry. So what was our strategy of studying? Okay, as I told you, we went through new companies that has no historical records. And that was important because in that situation, we have the same information at the bank. We don't know nothing about this company, about just the name of just someone who approached us with an idea of a business. We need companies with a sole manager. We need to be easy to assign a gender to each company. So those that have a big board of directors are not good for us, because this is, in that situation, it's difficult to know this is a male or a female company. So we want, for those companies that we have a sole manager, a clear CEO that is managing the company. And then we analyze the credit demand, because we know every time that these companies has asked for a loan. No, this is not a survey. It's every time a bank has asked for a company has asked for a loan, and we know what happens later. So we know if they get these loans, and afterward what happens if they pay back or they don't pay back those loans that they have asked for them. So with this, we can go in the analysis in 3 steps. First, we look at the credit demand, then we go look at the credit access, and then we go to the credit performance. The thing is that we only look at credit access for those that has demand for a credit. So we discard those companies that hasn't asked for a loan. Then we look at the credit performance, but only for those that has received a loan. Okay. So give you an idea, each year you have a different demand for credit. It's not the same the first year. It's more likely that a company asks for a loan in the first year than in later years. So this has been different across the economic cycle. We end with around 85,000 companies in our sample. So the first analysis we did, it was looking at the credit demand. We look if a company, how likely a company is to ask for a loan. So in the left column, what you have is the year the company is created, how likely is that the company asks for a loan. And what we observe is that companies with a female CEO are 10% less likely to ask for a loan than male CEO companies. So in fact, this is something that happens. They are less likely to ask for a loan. And this is something that happens the first year of the company, but also in the following years. In column 2, you have what happens in the next year after the creation of the company. Third column, what happens in the second year after the creation of the company, and so on. So you have some consistency in that companies created by women are between 10 and 25% less likely to ask for a bank loan than companies created by a man. That's the first thing we observe. There are 2 alternative explanations why is happening this. One is that some people have said that women are more risk averse than men. So if they are more risk averse, they don't like to go into debt to have a higher leverage that is generally associated with more risk. That could be an explanation. But the second one will be that if they are anticipating that they are not going to receive the loan, they will say, okay, why bother to ask? I'm not gonna ask for something if they are gonna say me no. So this anticipation of rejection will make them more shy to ask for one. So there are two alternative explanations. We are not able to disentangle which of these two explanations are behind, but this is something that we observe and is consistent. And true, this is also true that this is something that is not new in our research. You can find it in several previous research in the literature that women are less likely to ask for a loan. The important thing is that we go to the second part, is that we know when, in spite of all of this, a woman CEO has asked for a loan for her company, and we know if they have received a loan or not. So one problem you have usually when you look at if companies has a lower leverage, if they are owned by women or men, is that you don't know if they have less bank credit because they have asked less or because they have received less when they have asked. So now we have a situation where we have only those companies that have positively asked for a loan. And we look at what happens later. So concentrating only in those companies that have asked for a loan, we look at if they have received a loan or not. And this is the most interesting part, because what we observe is that, once again, even only for those companies that has asked for a loan, those that have a female CEO are 10% less likely to obtain that loan than male CEO companies. And the interesting thing is this only happened in the year the company is created. If you look in following years, this is not happening. It's only in the first year of the company. Okay, and this is important because what is the difference between the first year and the following years? The big difference is after the first year, you can provide the bank with a balance sheet, a profit and loss account. You can show hard data. You can show them hard data on the situation or the financial situation of your company. In that situation, the bank can use their models and decide if they give a loan or not. And what we observe is when the banks are in that situation where they have hard data, they are not discriminated companies with a female CEO. We observe in the year 2, year 3, year 4, there are no difference. There are not a statistical difference between them. So that is saying something. There is no taste-based discrimination. Because if you have taste-based discrimination, you will don't care if they have more information or less information. You will be still giving less credit to female CEO companies. So this result, this difference between the year creation and the following years is telling you that this is not taste-based discrimination. But there are differences in the first year. And in the first year, you have a problem is that the credit scoring is given on the entrepreneur personal information. Is you arrive to a bank office and say, I want to create a company. I have just created a company. I want a loan because I think my company has a good future. And the thing is that the bank officer who has to decide if giving you a credit or not can ask you, show me some information about your company, because the only information that will give you is the initial report, the initial that you create. You go through all business angels and venture capitalists and banks to ask for this financing. So in that situation, what happens is that for some reason, women are less likely to get a loan than a man. And this could be for two reasons. It could be because the quality of the project was worse than the quality of other projects. So that will be a statistical discrimination. Bank officer will examine them and say, oh no, these women tend to give me less quality project. So we will be in this statistical discrimination. Or it could be implicit discrimination. When they look at them, for some reason, they are not evaluating the quality or the credit quality of these female proposals for credit equally to how they are evaluating the projects from men. So the thing is, how can we disentangle it? Okay, you ask many researchers will say you need to control for other variables, you control for the age, you need to control for the education, you need to control for many other things. And these other things could be correlated with the credit quality or the quality of the entrepreneur or how the background and all this kind of stuff. And it's true, if we could have them, that would be wonderful. Now again, the privacy laws in Spain doesn't allow us to know anything about the entrepreneurs apart from their name. So we cannot go this way, but we have a better one. So going back to these graphs, if there is a statistical discrimination, once you get a loan, the credit quality will be similar for the companies that have get it a loan regardless of the gender, because being an economic rational decision, the credit quality should be the same for both of them. However, if there is implicit discrimination, credit quality for companies that are managed by women should be higher than the credit quality of the loans granted to companies managed by men. And the reason is that there has been a bias an unconscious bias in the assertion of the credit quality. So instead of being in the blue area, you are in the green area. So a way to look if you are in an implicit discrimination or you are in a statistical discrimination is to look at the performance afterwards. Because if there is no difference in the performance between these two groups of companies, the credit quality should be the same. The credit performance should be the same. Should be rational. You have decided they are the best companies, and they should have approximately the same credit quality. But if there is implicit discrimination, then the credit quality is not the same for both cases. You have cases, the group of companies managed by women should have a higher credit quality than companies managed by men. So the probability of default of the loans should be lower. The probability of default should be lower for women than for men. And that's what we are going to test. So this is the third part of our analysis, is we look at the credit performance. We look at the credit performance across the years and across the age of the company. What we observe? Well, we observe something very nice, is that we have the same result that we observe with the credit access, is that in the first year, for those loans granted for women, the credit quality, the credit performance afterwards is higher for women. This implies that they are less likely to go into default than men. So the credit quality of them is higher. This is something we were expecting if what we have is implicit discrimination. And the thing is that this is confirmed because in the following years, where we observe no difference between men and women asking for a loan, we does not observe any difference in the performance. So when they are applying the same credit standards, they get the same results. And we know that because they are using hard data. But when we are using soft data, like what they think about the project, and this is something qualitatively by nature, what we observe is that they are applying higher standards for women. So only those that are overachievers are able to get a loan. So that's the most important thing. And I have to say, this is implicit. They don't want to lose money because they are losing money. Why they are losing money? Because if they get more loans to women that are having a better performance, banks will get more money. So they are not doing this on purpose, and we don't know also that they are not doing this on purpose, because in the following years when they have hard data, they are not discriminating them. So it's something that is happening in this first step of the creation of the company, and it's something that if they know, they could correct, they would, or at least they should correct. And you say, okay, it's only the first year. What's the point there? That's not that relevant. But the problem is that the first year is very important for a company, because it's in the start of the company. What happens then, it will compound on it. If you are able to grow in the first year, then the growth in the next second, third, fourth year will compound on this performance you get in the first year. If you are not able to grow at the beginning, you will be always lagging those companies that did have access to loan in the first year. So that's very important for the overall economy. The good thing, the bright side of this is this: if this is implicit and being an economical and unwilling, then the solution is quite straightforward. You just need to let them know. You just need to tell everybody involved in the process of granting loans that there might be implicit discrimination. So if they are aware of that, they could look at what is driving this and how they can change it. So that's in a nutshell our research and my presentation. So I give the floor back to Demet. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ricardo. That was very interesting paper and a good presentation. We have a couple of questions. I also received some via email, but I'll start with these. Let me see. Sonia. For statistical discrimination, I'm not familiar with the paper you cite, but my assumption is there are different thresholds that could be applied. A threshold for maximum profit and a threshold for maximum fairness are different ways of discriminating based on statistical principles. I wonder about these biases implicit in the mathematical models and statistical decisions the institution makes. Did you look deeper into this by chance? A bit long, but I hope you got the idea.
Okay, it's a good question. I will try to answer. I'm not sure if I'm answering correctly, but the idea with statistical is that the threshold you are applying should be the same. The problem is not with the thresholds, but with the hidden quality of the proposal. Is the idea behind it. So the thing is that someone who is affected by statistical discrimination is not should not be individually affected. If in principle, if the quality of the project is good, they will pass this. It is true that in some case, some people talk about the statistical discrimination in the sense that if the agent is lazy in looking at the quality of the individual proposal, they could look at the average of the group. So that's something that sometimes has been talked about, like a statistical discrimination. Okay, like a typical one is like say, okay, women are not so convinced with their work. They are trying to balance work and life balance. So men are more focused on the job, so better to give it to a man. That could be statistical discrimination because you don't know nothing about that person and the life and the circumstances of anything like that. You are applying a stereotype to them. And the thing is that some people call that statistical discrimination, but we think that this is not statistical discrimination. This is implicit discrimination. You are discriminating about this person talking about something that is not true. So you are in fact biasing your analysis. So that's a big difference. I don't know if it is answering your question, but this is at least what the maximum depth we have gone with this analysis with that.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you.
So Isabel is asking, is it possible to be taste-based discrimination on the first year? How can we prove it?
Okay, what we expected if you have taste-based is that this will not change with the pass of time. If you don't like giving a credit to a woman, it doesn't matter the information they give it to you, you will still not give it to them. So this will not fade away with the pass of time. That's why we think that it could not be test-based. If we only observe the first year, it will be very difficult to differentiate between implicit and test-based. It's true. But the thing is that since we are able to observe what happens later in the process, we think we can rule out comfortably that this is not test-based.
Thank you, Ricardo. Lindsay, I have a couple of questions. Do you have information on the gender of the loan officers? And do you see, and do you see any difference in the results?
That would be wonderful to look. But the truth is we don't have it. We don't have it. But there are some research on that.
She's mentioned one of those. I think the IFC found that in the DRC, women make better mobile money against agents because they attract more women clients. They contribute more to the banks. So there's the link provided to everyone.
Yes, it's true. That's a very wonderful research. I am aware of it, and they do a very nice job on that. But unlikely we don't have that information. We can only do an aggregate of the overall system. But that will be also, there's a very nice paper on that. The one you mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Another question. What response have you had from participants in the banking sector? How widely has your research been shared?
Okay, it makes some impact in the media. It's true. We have been approached by a couple of banks. The first reaction they have is we don't discriminate. With this phase of panic, and that looks like this is implicit discrimination because they say they don't discriminate. But when you talk with them, they start saying, okay, we use some create a standard, or they are just a model. You put your data and you receive a credit scoring. And this is completely gender is never an issue, so there should be no difference. And then the next question is, and which data you put the first year? And the credit, we talked with the top risk manager of one of the biggest Spanish banks, and his answer was, it's true. The first year we don't have this. We use a different method. So because the first year you need to be more quality, to know the people, to decide on the feeling you have on the project, on what is given to you. And this is where the situation is changing. And where they have to recognize that maybe they didn't say they did that, but it was like, maybe there is a problem there. And what they are doing is, if it is your next question, is now they are looking at the implicit test, because one interesting thing is that in the literature there are implicit tests to look if someone has an implicit bias against someone. There are very nice tests in the web you can look at. And so they were trying, what they tell me is they're gonna try to make a pilot on their bank officers to look if they have some kind of unconscious bias, and could be an explanation. But it's not the only one. You could have the implicit bias in the way you evaluate the quality of the people, because sometimes when you try not to discriminate, you are actually discriminating. And I explain. If you are looking at your experience, in the case of women, they have had to step down a bit to take care of some children or older people, that is something that happens. Then this will go into a lower value in their scorings. But maybe it was good when you are only looking at men and looking at their experience, but maybe when you are considering women, you should also include this this time as experience. It's a different type of experience, but indeed an experience that could be useful even for running a company. So teaching equally sometimes produce different outcomes. And maybe in the case, for instance, if you're considering that a woman is less risk averse than a man, that's a good thing. So maybe you should take into account that if they are more risk averse, they will enter into less risk behavior in the future. So that's a good thing for the credit scoring. So sometimes what you think that that you are not discriminating, maybe it's discriminating. I don't know if I explain what you understand what I try to say, but they are looking at that, those ones that approach us.
Thank you, Ricardo. Yeah, Lindsay is with us, so if he's not, if you haven't answered her question, then she can have a follow-up question. So there's one more, or two more anyway. Are any banks using this to direct money, more money towards female entrepreneurs? 14% less default is not insignificant. Do they understand they are leaving money on the table?
That we try to explain them that they are leaving money in the table and they should go for it. This is a new research. I hope this same thing. This is true that there is a bank that is now doing some noise in the media saying that we support female entrepreneurs. I don't know if it has something to do or not with this, but it is true that at least they are doing some advertisements on this side. But I don't know. But they should do it. And in fact, one of the things that we try to do with this research is showing them that they have money to take advantage of now.
Thank you. And one, okay. Well, okay. So there's a question about how to post the question. So I'm going to answer that. Please use the Q&A tab. If you are using a laptop, it should be at the bottom of the screen. So it says Q&A. You can type there. If you are unable to see it for any reason, you can send it through chat function. I can monitor that too. Okay, Maria is asking a question. It's a little bit longer, so I'll read it slowly. There's a research article. Research women ask for raises and as often as men, but they are less likely to get them. Published at the Harvard Business Review in 2018. That concludes that even if women and men are equally likely to negotiate their salaries, a woman who asked obtained a raise 15% of the time, while men obtained a pay increase 20% of time. Would you think that there is a relationship between this result and your papers? Asking for money, a raise or credit, or get it is on average less probably when you are a woman than when you are a man? Good question.
It's a very good question, and indeed I didn't know this research. It's very interesting. I will look for it because it's a very nice one to add to our review, because I think it's the same situation. I think it's exactly the same. We are in the same problem. Is that when you are asking for this rise, how this is evaluated by the manager, and I think it could be in the same situation. I don't know what are the conclusion of why they are receiving less rises, if this is because of implicit discrimination or the space or whatever it is the cause, but it will be, I think is in the same situation. Yes, for sure. Very interesting.
Sounds like for the same reasons, I guess. So there's another one. Are your findings and research applicable to other forms of discrimination, similar to the first one, I guess? For example, race.
That will be really interesting. In fact, it would be nice to look at other things like race or age. The problem is we don't have that information. The only information we have is the name of the CEO. So the thing with that is very difficult to get any information other than the gender. So, but it could be possible that these other variables are relevant. Gender is not, I think you could look in the case of Spain. In other countries, they have looked at the gender, at the race, and in the US, I think, and they have found yes, they are less likely to get along. They don't go into this depth on the kind of causes behind this less likely to get along, but they can look at the. We are not able to do it with our data.
Thank you. When we say company managed by women, would it be overkill to make an assumption like management equals decision-making center? Depending on the legal form or status of the company, management can vary quite a lot. Is there a board? How many women are on it? And what is their power in terms of decision-making? If there isn't, what is the structure of the management?
Okay, that's a very good question. And in fact, that was one of the problems we have is we have a board and then the executive management. Then it is not clear which one is the one relevant. That was the reason that we start with 2 million companies that were the one created in that period, and we discard those with a board. So we only get that one that you have the manager is exactly the same person that is the only manager, that is the only person in the board. So there is no possibility of being one of those, because it is true that one of the main problems with these things of companies is determining which is the gender of the company. And this is very hard to do it. So that was the reason we only concentrated in those companies we were quite certain of who was the boss. We try to look only at those companies, because it's true that if we try to extend the sample to more than these 85,000 companies, you could end with cases where it is not clear if this is because of the board or because of the management. That's true.
Thank you, Ricardo. There's a easy question. Will the slides be made available to participants? This is what I need your permission for.
Of course,
we can share.
You have my permission.
We can share with the registered
More than
participants.
happy.
Yeah. Okay, good. That was an easy.
In fact, you already have it.
We have it. Yes,
okay.
We can just
Wonderful.
send it to the registered participants after this. To which extent could these findings be translated to individuals instead of companies?
That's a good question. In fact, I think given the result we obtained, I think that in this case, we are in the situation where we have hard data. Talking with the risk managers of the companies, they told us that in the case of credit to individuals, to families, they only look at the hard data, like how much money you make, how many times have you been working in this company, what are the assets you already have, and they put that in the computer, and then the computer say okay or say no way. So they are more similar to the situation we were in the 3, 4, 5 year of that company. So we think because of this interaction with the risk managers, that in the case of individuals, we are more in the post creation of the company situation than in the first one. So in that situation, we are more comfortable that we think there is no discrimination. But then again, we cannot analyze that, because once again, privacy laws doesn't allow us to look at that.
Thank you, Ricardo. One of my favorite questions. How as supervisors can start this conversation with banks? How can we quantify how much money banks are losing by not providing access to credit to women in the same level as the men?
The way to look at it is looking at to look at the performance of the loans. If you saw you ask them for the performance of loan given to men and women, if you have differences because of gender, then you can show them that they are they are not doing their job in looking at the credit quality of. So I think it's the best way for the point of view of a supervisor to check if they are having a problem with this or not.
Shouldn't be any discrimination because we should be interested in credit quality, right?
That's it.
Yeah. If demographic variables like number of children and marital status cannot be observed, as they may be considered as personal data, there is not a bias of specification in the analysis.
Okay. There could be. That's always the hard question of this. It is true that you could have this marital status or the number of children you have or not have, like the age or all these variables. It could be behind the reason behind you are not giving them a loan. That's true. Yeah, and the model for given or not given a loan could be biased because of these variables that we are not observing. That's true. That's why we go through to the third step. Because regardless of these variables, if there is no discrimination, or if this is because of this other variable that we are not able to observe, then there will be no difference in the credit performance. So the fact that we observe this difference in credit performance is telling us that this is not because we are not observing other variables.
Thank you, Ricardo. I forgot to unmute myself. Another favorite question, because it includes supervisors. I'm biased in that sense. What advice would you give banking supervisors to help address gender discrimination in credit access?
Okay, as we were talking before, first of all is convincing them that they are losing money. If you are able to convince the banks that they are losing money, they will be the first interested in correcting that. So I should go and look for that, because I think this is the key. And how to correct it, if you found it, is I think banks can work a lot. There are some strategies to correct this implicit discrimination, but you can also check for this, as I mentioned, the differences in the credit models, the credit scoring models. There can be some variables that you are treating equal for men and women, and maybe this should be different because the credit quality that you are obtaining is not has some bias. So this is another way to check for it. That will be the two approaches. One, you have convinced the bank or you have discovered that your bank is having a better performance for women than for men.
Thank you, Ricardo. There's one more, I guess, here. Yes. I'm just wondering, how can the unconscious bias be corrected when companies are unaware of them, since they are unobservable?
Okay. When they are unconscious, they are not going to correct it because they are still going to do it. The first thing is that they have to be aware of it. So that was part of the objective of this, the goal of this research. It was to show it. And the second part is that to make this available for the banks. And we have done at least in part this, and they are now looking at it. And the good thing of this is, if this is something that is unconscious and unobservable, but you make it conscious and observable, then can be corrected. So that's a good thing. There are some studies for instance, other cases of implicit discrimination are, for instance, in the academics will know it, is when the students are asked to evaluate their professors, they tend to give higher scores to men than women. And they have made some studies, and what they did is they give some students information. Do you were aware that in past years female professors were given lower scores than men, and only given that produced that this implicit discrimination disappear. That's a very nice study made by some people in the World Bank, and it was very nice because it was just giving this awareness at the beginning. Didn't need to do anything else.
Thank you, Ricardo. I believe you answered this question in a way throughout the other questions. Does this research cut across all races, that is between whites and black, or skewed towards one race?
Okay, that's interesting. In Spain, there is not big there's not such a big difference of races. Proportional is quite homogeneous. It's true that there's a big increase in immigration community, and it could be interesting to look if there is difference between this. This is something new in Spain, because if you look 2 generations away, there were no immigrants in Spain, or everybody has been living here for years. There was not this melting that you find in other countries. But it's true that in the last 20, 30 years, there has been a big increase. Now 10% of the people who live in Spain has not been born here, but that could be a change. We try to look at this through the names, and sometimes if the name has some Spanish root, you could think this is Spanish, and if it has another root, the name could be from someone who was an immigrant. The problem with that is that almost more than half of Spanish immigrants are from Latin America. So looking at the name, it's impossible to know if it has been born in Spain or in Peru. So we were not able to do, and we have to discard this analysis. But it's true that we were also interested in this part of the analysis, but we were not able to do it in Spain. Maybe in other countries it will be easier to do.
Okay, I think we are done with the questions on the Q&A tab. I have some submitted questions, previously submitted questions. I would like to mention a couple of those, since we have some time. In the meantime, please continue typing your questions if you have any more. Has your research begun to be used by banks in Spain or elsewhere to address issues of implicit bias in bank personnel?
I think I already answered this question, because it was I have been, as we mentioned, we have been talking with a couple of banks and with the people from the risk management and the social responsibility managers of those banks, and because in fact it was the social responsibility people that get aware of the paper and pass it to the research people, to the risk management people, and we talked with them, and it was very nice, and they were very open to discuss it, and what I know is, what they told me is that they were looking at it and how to correct it. No, I don't know anymore.
Okay, thanks, Ricardo. So maybe one last question. It's a long one again, bear with me, I will read it. In my opinion, the potential reduction of this gender bias may not be so related to showing the amount of money that the bank loses, but to work in the direction of reducing the risk aversion to gender that still exists in the banking industry. I think that banks won't change their behavior until the risk aversion related to gender reduces. And that may be also possible by increasing females in the credit decision process in the banks. Do you know what is the proportion of women in these banking departments? It is possible that a more gender diverse composition of these departments will help to reducing the risk aversion such that this becomes less sensitive to gender. What do you think?
Okay, Very long question by Teresa. I will tell you, as some of the previous question mentioned, there is a very nice research on the role played by bank officers, the gender of the bank officers. So maybe more women on this bank office process could help a lot. But the truth is that our research is telling you that this is not something about risk aversion for women. It's some kind of something implicit. And okay, you can solve this. Maybe if you have more women bank officers, you will have a better outcome. And it's true that maybe, for instance, could help a lot to reduce this lower demand. Maybe women will be less shy to ask for a loan if they are perceived they are going to be listened, if they see more and a woman on the other side of the table in the negotiation process. Maybe could help with this part on the demand side. But I think you should also have men doing less discrimination. You cannot expect that, okay, men are going to discriminate, let's put more women. You also need that the men stop doing this, especially if they don't know they are doing.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So we cannot just solve the problem by hiring more women, which is a solution, but it's not
and it's good one. It's a good thing to have more women.
Yes, problem will continue occurring if we cannot change the whole the reason, the main problem. So I think that's all with the questions. We are almost done by timing. So I think we will stop here. I would like to thank those of you who attended today and asked those very good questions. Thank you very much again and staying with us for an hour. And Ricardo, thank you so much for your time and joining us today, sharing your insights and findings of very valuable research. We look forward to other work from you
Thank you
on
very
this
much.
very important issue. Thank you so much. So bye, everyone.